The hidden message behind SpongeBob's Rock Bottom episode is deeper than what we could have imagined when we watched it for the first time. The episode starts with Bob and Patrick very happy after a nice date at Love World, a colorful and full of fun place where the vibes are great. They board the bus without thinking much about it. SpongeBob, while trying to pay, hits the driver a couple times.
Nope.
Then takes a seat. After sharing some cheap laughs, Patrick very nonchalantly asks Bob where he's leaving Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob, not that nonchalant, realizes they've taken the wrong route. He very alarmed starts screaming they've taken the wrong bus. Bob, it's not big deal. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The driver hits the gas because accelerating downhill is always a lot of fun. As they're getting into this unknown place, Bob tries to do something about it and attempts to get closer to the driver, this being useless, as he is rudely thrown to the back of the bus. Yeah, just an average bus ride. The uneasy feeling that this episode gives could not only represent the disturbing fear that we felt as kids towards the dark, but it also speaks to me on a deep level because of the profound analogy about anxiety and finding hope in the most unexpected places. But we'll eventually get to that. Continuing with the episode, the bus finally stops. SpongeBob and Patrick find themselves stranded in apparently nothingness, surrounded by darkness and uncertainty. Patrick worried asks, "Where are we?" To which Bob grimly responds, "Rock bottom." This could be seen as a metaphor of being at your lowest moment. You know, rock bottom, and how difficult it's the process to get out, as we will see. This place contrasts a lot with the place just a few moments ago he was in. One place being to get on an innocent fun bench, and the other to get on a meth bench. This place is evoking them fear and insecurity for the apparent dangers that rock bottom could have. The first impressions are that it's a weird place, entirely different, so much so that even the simple task of identifying which bathroom you are supposed to go is unclear. What is this, a progressive school? The characteristics of the inhabitants of Rock Bottom makes them even more scared, reinforcing the idea that darkness harbors only monsters with bad intentions and dangers. This perception is wrong though, and will be debunked later on. Being out of his normal and safe comfort zone, he does not understand the language or even the physiology of this part of the sea. Surrounded by uncertainty and darkness, naturally, our first reaction would be, "I want my mommy." But were they really in a dangerous situation? Or just the uncertainty did not let them see beyond their fear? We who live in segregated areas, you know, the hood, are also friendly, you know. In an attempt to regain control of the situation, Bob nervously calls Patrick, asking him to wait patiently in case the bus heading home came back, while he goes to find the schedule for the next buses. And Patrick will let him know. Nervous but determined, Bob heads to the bus station. Without warning, he hears Patrick's voice indicating that the bus has arrived. Only that he was already on the bus that was getting further away. Whoa, not exactly a bestie move to be frank. Desperately, SpongeBob runs after the bus, like the bus was an up-and-coming young child star, and Bob was Drake. The bus leaves without him. He was unable to return to his safe place. Sad, defeated, disappointed, and now alone, Bob returns to the bus stop. But this time, something's different. He finds himself totally alone. He's completely lonely in a strange, dark, and unsettling place. Bob's expression is already different. With no Patrick or any shorty around, he no longer has to pretend he's not scared. Worried about the time and that it's almost time to feed Gary, he realizes that his shoelaces aren't tight. A serious mistake. But not because in a place like this you can't bend down, but rather because this causes him to miss the bus. Resigned, Bob waits patiently for the bus to return, but after a gust of wind, his balloon floats away. Bob desperately runs after it to recover it. But why is that balloon so important? Why doesn't he just let it go? And that's because it's a reminder of home. It is his last link with a safer place. Losing that balloon means losing that small but significant representation, and thus ending completely alone. But by clinging to recover his balloon, he loses the opportunity to return home. Frustrated, he throws his hat to the ground, as if that were to blame, not noticing the presence of one inhabitant of the zone. Without his balloon, his hat, and any chance of getting home, he decides to do what he should have done from the beginning. Finally, Bob asks for help, but the rock bottom inhabitant seems to mock him and goes for the balloon he just lost. Trying to clarify the situation, Bob once again misses the bus and the chance to return home. Why does Bob still trust what got him into this mess in the first place? Despite being abandoned by the boss multiple times, what a silly goose. He keeps his hopes in the boss that never seem to arrive. And when it does, it seems to reject him over and over. Do you have any red boss in your life? Because I do. What's even more curious is that Bob returned home in the most unexpected way. Now more determined than scared, Bob decides he won't move until the boss arrives. However, you can't be more diligent on an empty stomach. So he heads to a vending machine to buy some chocolate. I think we all can agree how at the moment Bob stands in front of the vending machine, waiting for the chocolate to drop, filled me with a feeling of anguish and anxiety that he would miss the boss. I imagine the hunger and fear that Bob felt at that moment. That made us deeply empathize with him. This really was the embodiment of a stress dream. All of this so that he would end up missing the boss again and again. This scene, in addition to providing a comic relief, it also can be seen in a way where the boss, an object or symbol of an easy, logical, and simple way back to his comfort zone, is telling Bob that he is not ready to leave rock bottom, that he still cannot return home without facing the fear of darkness and the unknown. For me, this unknown and dark place is a situation where I find myself at this moment. I move out alone to a bigger but sometimes cruel city in hopes of something better. I find myself alone in an empty apartment with no furniture. The whole episode shows rock bottom as this deep, dark, and scary pit that's basically impossible to escape. After some failing and useless tactics, angry, Bob heads to the bus station, now with a more hostile than fearful attitude. In this new arc, it is noticeable that there was a change in the way he's facing this problem. He no longer seems to fear the rock bottom inhabitants, since when he gets to the line, he asserts himself as the alpha male, claiming to be number one, which we gotta appreciate the significant step in overcoming his fear. But little Wicklin is relegated to last place. Like I get you're in your villain arc or whatever, but that's no excuse to break the rules. Frustrated and a bit intimidated, Bob waits in line, only to have a local place an egg on his head, pushing him further back in the line. It's nice to see that even in this apathetic wasteland, they still indulge in some funny antics. Defeated, he explodes and throws a tantrum, since it seems that everything is going wrong for him. After embarrassing himself and once more calmed, he decides to stand in line like everyone, where he finds another obstacle, which is the accent. Whoa, SpongeBob is literally me. After understanding the accent, Bob's explaining that he needs to know when the next boss is going to leave and spit a lot of saliva in the process. They sadly tell him that he has missed the boss again and the opportunity to return home.
Ooh, tough luck, kid. That's the last one till morning.
In that situation, Bob has no other choice but to pull out the carrying card and starts demanding for another boss, which naturally he is ignored. So that few seconds later, the place turns off its lights. He takes out his little cute flashlight, but that plastic crap shorts out and turns off, plunging him into a deeper darkness.
This isn't your average everyday darkness. This is advanced darkness.
Now, being really scared, he hears a noise. Bob starts walking, then starts running, then tries to fly like a chicken, I guess, only to crash into that wall. Nervously, he warns his supposed pursuer that at that moment and with his nerves to the edge, he meets the local whom he asks for help. Let's take a deeper look to this scene, meeting the rock bottom stranger again, who hands Bob the balloon. Remember, this balloon is a representation of the bone of his home, and like falling from the sky, the local also illuminates Bob's path, both literally and metaphorically. The light in rock bottom represents hope of getting out of that dark and unusual place. And it's funny how rock bottom itself takes Bob out of float, meaning that his fear of the unknown and what lives inside it was inside Bob's mind, showing that everything in that place is not so bad, that not everyone there have ill intentions, finding that even in the darkest moments, we can always find the light of hope that will guide us home. SpongeBob returns home safe and sound, says goodbye to his friend with the accent he learned, to which he responds with a simple "you're welcome," showing they weren't so different after all. There are two different interpretations for this episode, depending on the age you watch this episode. Let's first see when we were little goblins. As children, this episode caused a curious unease. It genuinely scared us. but at the same time it compelled us to keep watching. This can be rooted in an ancient and primitive fear of darkness and the dangers within it, as you might get manhandled. This episode brilliantly addressed rock bottom as an unknown and dark, inhospitable place, and filled us with so much anxiety that kept us on the edge about what will happen next. We can interpret rock bottom inhabitants as the presumed dangers and monsters that inhabit this darkness, besides making us feel vulnerable, alert, and needing a cuddle. Maybe this episode tried to give us a lesson as children that after all, the darkness and the unknown are not as bad as we think. We don't have to be afraid of being alone, and that you should respect bus drivers. Now let's see this episode from the perspective of an adult, or well, our current. Let's start with the first scene. Bob is actually an adult, but he acts like a child all the time. Although he tries to control his emotions and control the situation, he ultimately can't do anything as this situation has gotten out of control. Arriving at a different place than usual makes him feel uneasy and uncertain. Rock bottom can be seen in many ways, but for me it can be a descent into emotional decline. Taking the wrong bus can be interpreted as a situation spiraling out of control, causing an emotional downturn, which really speaks to me as I empathize with the emotional place I find myself right now. There's many things going on in my life right now, which seems an isolated situation and the always present financial stress, because yep, I did fell off. I know it's embarrassing. Rock bottom being uncertain at first only makes Bob feeling insecure and anxious. Once he goes deeper, each interaction becomes more hostile. After trying again and again and failing, making each attempt to get out of that boy on his own seem useless. It is not until he resigns himself and accepts help from others that his path illuminates, getting out of rock bottom easier than his attempts to try to get out alone. I don't know what my hope is gonna be yet, I still don't see the light, but I know eventually it'll find me. A valuable lesson from this episode is that only with the help of others and the acceptance of our problems, we can find the light in the bleakest places.